Meet John Malasky, Jr. of Albany, who served in the U.S. Navy from July 1972 through October 1978. This interview is taking place in the Samuel S. Stratton VA Medical Center in Albany, New York on April 2, 2003 at 11 a.m. The interview is being conducted by June and Kenneth Hunter. John, please tell us your full name and when and where you were born.
John J. Malasky, Jr. I was born in Albany, New York on July 9th, 1951.
What did you do before you entered military service?
I was a student. Then I dropped out of school and I completed my equivalency diploma. I was kind of wayward during my adolescence, without much direction. Finally, I decided that perhaps the Navy might help me achieve some educational goals and start me off in some direction.
Okay, why did you happen to choose to enter the Navy?
Because I had very few other options at the time as I saw them. I thought the Navy would be the best choice.
And tell us where you reported and what basic training was like.
Well, first there was the ordeal of the recruiter in Albany, and I went down there and told him I wanted to enlist, and he set me up for a battery of tests. He asked what I wanted to do. Not having any skills at the time, I thought perhaps maybe I could be a cook, so I suggested cook. So he said, oh, well, that can be done. So then I took the tests, and then my test results came back, and I went down to see him, and he said, now, what do you really want to be? And I said, a cook? I can't be a cook? And he said, not with these scores you can't be. And I thought they were too low, but in fact they were very high, and I had my choice of whatever I wanted to do in the Navy. I only wanted to be a cook, so he made suggestions, and he suggested perhaps submarines. And within the submarines, there's the nuclear program, and my grades were high enough for that. So he suggested that I join the Navy's nuclear power program and go submarine service.
Where did you go for basic training from Albany? Out to the West Coast, Great Lakes, or Florida?
Boot camp was Great Lakes, which had to be done and completed before I could go on with the submarine training. So I was in Great Lakes during the winter. It was freezing out there. It was bitter cold, but that's where I took my basic training.
How long was the basic training period, and what kinds of training did you undergo?
Basic, if I remember correctly, perhaps 12 weeks. I'm not exactly sure of the length. A lot of physical training, safety classes, firefighting classes, basic seamanship, everything that a sailor would have to know to function in the Navy.
Were there any preliminaries in the basic training for submarine service?
No, that would come afterward if I completed basic training. In fact, that would come a long time afterward, because first they put you into a rating. I was rated a machinist mate, which already, when I joined the nuclear program, there was a choice of 4 ratings. I chose electronics technician, and I was qualified for that. However, the needs of the service were such that I was assigned as a machinist mate, something I would not have chosen. So I had to go to Great Lakes after boot camp, return to Great Lakes to attend the Machinist Mate A school, which is a service school that then trained you within that rate, which was Machinist Mate. That was about 16 weeks. So I went through the Machinist Mate A school, they call it, and I learned everything there was about being a machinist mate.
Where did you train for the submarine service after you finished at Great Lakes, and what was the most difficult part of the submarine mariner's training?
After Great Lakes, I was then transferred to New London, Connecticut, and the submarine school. I remember again, that was like 9 weeks, 10 weeks. The classes were pretty intense. There was quite a bit to know about ships' systems, how they all interact. Then there was the physical aspects. You had to be physically qualified before you could be chosen. And that meant a pressure test. You had to be able to equalize at different pressures if the submarine were at different depths. So there was a pressure chamber. That was one of the most difficult. In fact, some people, they would stay in there despite the fact that they weren't able to equalize, and there would be ruptured eardrums and injuries as a result. I ended up with a pinched ear the first time because my sinuses wouldn't clear, and then there was several weeks where it was undecided whether I would continue because I couldn't equalize. So finally, after an active-fed regime, it cleared, and I was able to equalize, and I made it through the pressure chamber. After the pressure chamber, though, came the escape training tank. It's a tank. It's 100 feet high. There's 100 feet of water in it. It's a tower filled with water. And they take you down to about, I think it was 50 feet, maybe 60, a little more. You go into this chamber, and they start to equalize the pressure to what it would be at the depth that you are at, and then you are supposed to go under the water and go out this hatch and take the journey up to the top of the tank. All the while yelling ho 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 ho, so that you can equalize and your lungs don't burst as the air expands as you go up the tank. They have divers in the tank which they try to slow you down if you're not breathing out and if you're going too fast. That was frightening because I was never a good swimmer, and I faked the swimming in boot camp actually. So I was terrified of the tank to begin with. And as we were in the tank pressurizing, one person discovered that he had claustrophobia, and he started screaming. So they had to depressurize and empty the water out of the tank to let him out. So that didn't do my nerves any good. I was scared to begin with, and I was terrified by this point. So they went through the process again. I went out and I did it. I bobbed to the surface, and I didn't have to swim. They just kind of pulled me to the side. And then they said they were going to do it again. That was a test. And I did it again, and I did make it through. There was one other aspect, which was free ascent, where you had to do it without the hood, and you had to blow out water from a depth of about 10, 15 feet. You had to do a free ascent. I had trouble with that. The bubbles kept going up my nose, and I just had trouble getting the technique down. I didn't think I was going to make it through because of that. So I went to the Y and practiced, and finally I got the technique down, and I made it through that. And I made it through the academic aspects of the submarine school, and that was it. I graduated and waited for my assignment.
Can you describe what your feelings were like when you received that first submarine assignment, and what was the name of your ship?
I was apprehensive, didn't know what to expect. My detailer, the person who assigns your ship, thought it was humorous to put me on the Pulaski. Me being Polish, he assigned me to the USS Casimir Pulaski, SSBN 633. It's a fleet ballistic missile submarine. Its office is in New London. They say it's home ported out of New London, but actually it was in Holyloch, Scotland, and that's where it stayed when it wasn't on patrol. And there were two crews. I was on the gold crew, and there was the blue crew, and they would fly one crew over, fly the other crew back, and they would turn over the boat there in Holy Lock. So it was to New London, and I signed into the base at New London, and then I was off to Scotland, commercial airlines. They fly the whole crew over in one flight, and we were in Holy Lock, and then it was a month of refit. You go through a month of refit before the boat goes out. So it was getting to know the people, the crew, getting to know the basics of the job, and then it was underway, and the dive alarm went off, and that was it. We went down, and all was quiet. That's what I noticed right off. It's just everything seemed to get quiet. It was a hush, and nobody was talking or whatever else, and it had begun. And then there was the 3 months of routine that followed. I was busy, and anyone else who was new would be busy during the first, maybe the second patrol qualifying. Every new crew member has to do a ship's qualification. That means that they have to become proficient in all areas on the submarine. They have to know the submarine. They have to know everyone else's duties, their jobs. They have to be familiar with every aspect of the boat and what goes on. And you're tested. You have learning materials. You're tested, and then you finally have a final board where there's officers and experts who give you a test, and then if you do pass it, you become qualified submarines, and you earn the dolphins. The enlisted men wear silver dolphins, the officers gold dolphins.
What were your duties on board the Pulaski?
As I said, I had initially gone in under the nuclear power program, which meant that I would have been a nuclear machinist mate. However, I saw an opportunity to waive out of the program. I was able to get a waiver when I realized I was going to be a machinist mate in the nuclear power program. I realized that I really didn't want to be that. I learned that I could still go to submarines as a conventional machinist mate in the auxiliary equipment division. So I took the opportunity and I waived out of nuclear power. My grades were fine. It's just that I chose a path that I thought would be less demanding. The machinist mates, the nuclear machinist mates, they just have a horrendous work schedule, and in addition to the work, they have all the nuclear regulatory classes and regulations that they have to comply with. So I took a path of what I thought would be least resistance. It turned out to be just as challenging, however. As a member of the engineering department assigned to the auxiliary division aboard the Pulaski, it was a 24-hour-a-day job. We were responsible for nearly all the ship's operating systems, hydraulics, high-pressure air, potable water, sanitation, you name it, from one end of the ship to the other end of the ship, whereas the nuclear machinist mates only had to worry about the engine room. We had to worry about the entire ship, ship's control systems, the ability to emergency blow to get us to the surface. All of these systems were our responsibility. So initially, I trained for the forward watch, which meant that on my watch station I would be responsible for the equipment in the forward part of the ship. After that, I qualified aft. I was qualified for everything aft of the ship, everything that came within our responsibility. And then they chose me to be the ship's oxygen generator operator technician. That was a very complex position. I think being an ex-nuke had something to do with that, my scores or whatever else. But I was chosen, and I became proficient at that. And unfortunately, I became one of the few proficient at it, which meant that my workload was doubled, and oftentimes tripled, because the other crew's oxygen generator technicians didn't come up to my caliber, if I may say that. So I was responsible for doing their refits, my refits. I would come back and I would do their overhaul that should have been done when they were there. They would keep it together during their patrol, and then I would make any repairs, troubleshoot it when I got over there. So my job load, the minute I got to the sub, it started. In fact, they would take several of us out on a tugboat to meet the ship on its way in, so that I could go down and others could down and see the machinery operating, see what problems we had, and do a turnover. And we would walk this plank from the tugboat to the top of the sub, and of course the sub doesn't have any keel, so it's very unstable on top of the water. It rolls. We had to judge the jump from the plank onto the top of the sub, and then we would go down and we would inspect the equipment as the boat was coming into port. And then for the next 30 days, being in that position, being an oxygen generator technician, the next 30 days of refit, that would be my entire responsibility, is getting the oxygen generators in order for patrol. The oxygen generators make the oxygen that we store, and we supplement the air with it, and we scrub the air with the CO2 scrubbers, and we have catalytic converters that remove toxins from the air, and then we of course add the oxygen so that it's livable. We never surface for the 3 months, so we're totally self-contained. We make our own air, our own water, and of course electricity comes from the reactor. So that was my responsibility. They are dangerous. They can explode, because you take the seawater and you break it down through electrolysis into hydrogen and oxygen gases. The oxygen we store, the hydrogen we have to dispose of, and hopefully before it has an opportunity to explode and cause damage. It can blow out the side of the submarine. They were small hydrogen bombs, basically. So there was a lot of pressure in that position, because you had to ensure that everything was perfect, that seals wouldn't break, that every fitting was just perfect, that all the electronics associated with it were in working order. So there was countless tests, and there was countless maintenance chores. And being the most qualified oxygen generator operator, I didn't get much rest, because as I said, they are complex and people don't understand them. So even though we had others qualified to stand the watch, if something went wrong, I was constantly being woke up, and they bring me in. Is this supposed to do this? Is this wrong? Or is this right? So it was a 24-hour-a-day job with me.
You mentioned you were woken up from your quarters. Describe what your quarters were like. What was the area?
Well, being an oxygen generator technician, that was a plus when it came to accommodations. Normally, the crew is all contained in the lower level of the operations compartment, in an area where the lights are always off, and there are all these bunks, 3 high. However, because of the oxygen generators, which can be dangerous, there are separate bunks, 3 for the oxygen generator operators, back in the missile compartment, along with the missile techs. They have their own special bunks also. So I had these luxurious accommodations as opposed to being down in the hole. I had this separate area back by Machinery 1, which is just by the after the missile compartment. So there was just 3 of us oxygen generator technicians, and we had those special bunks with a little extra locker space, which helped. We could store more Cokes and cigarettes or whatever else we wanted to take along for the patrol. So I was happy. I wasn't happy in the days when I was down in the hole before I became the oxygen generator technician. It's like I said, it's dark and it's crowded, and there's always people changing watches, and so you never really get any good sleep.
How many people were on this submarine average?
We averaged about a crew of 110. In our division, there was supposed to be 15, maybe 16. We never had that many. And we were always short-staffed, which meant more work. We were on shifts, 6 hours on, 12 hours off. We would stand 6 hours of a watch, and then 12 hours off, where 6 of it, and we would sleep, and maybe 6 do whatever activities there are, which there aren't many. However, in our division, it was sometimes 6 hours on, and then maybe 6 hours of maintenance afterwards. Then maybe if you're lucky you get 6 hours sleep, unless there's a drill, which gets you up. We worked on an 18-hour day, our division did. It just kept rotating, 6 on, 12 off, 6 on, 12 off, and it always overlapped. So, and there would be drills. We never knew when the drills were coming. And with that rotation, sometimes we would be getting up at breakfast, or we'd be getting up at dinner, or at the midnight meal. So it was just constantly rotating through different meals and times, and you just lost track of time, actually.
How did they store food, and what were the meals like? What did they serve you?
They stored food everywhere. Wherever there was a space, they stored food. There were storage areas under berthing where people slept. The eggs, which had some type of special coating so that they didn't need refrigeration, but did need to be kept cool, they were in the torpedo room in the bilges, and elsewhere if they could find cool spots. Fresh foods like lettuce and vegetables only lasted the first month, and they worked hard to make the lettuce last as long as possible. Every day they would take each individual head of lettuce out, unwrap it, and remove the brown leaves, and then rewrap it, so that by the time you get down to the lettuce being used up, they were the size of Brussels sprouts. So yeah, it was a constant chore to keep us provided with the food. And the food was the best. That's about the only compensation that we had was, and I have a weight problem though, and even back then, and it was torture for me sometimes because I had to keep my weight down. But we had steaks, lobster, shrimp, scallops, beef Wellington, baked Alaska, the best of food. And the officers and the enlisted ate the same. They had their separate dining areas, but the food was of such high caliber that, you know, there was no distinctions. We all ate the same.
Did you have like freezers for all the meat and so forth?
Yep, the freezers, walk-ins, which constantly being monitored because we didn't want to lose. We didn't want to lose the meats or anything, you know, that they could be perishable.
So what was your typical day like? Say if you got up, you'd do your work, and did you have any free time for recreation? And if so, what did you do? And what did you do for exercise and so forth?
Well, the job itself was the only exercise, and that could be enough in itself. We had quite a bit of machinery, quite a few valves that you know that weighed a ton. I mean, we were constantly carrying and lugging heavy things, and we had to do a lot of gymnastics in that if there was a repair required, the piping and machinery were always in the way. So there was always, you always had to crawl through and around and lift above, and you know, that was exercise in itself, just constantly you know, working on the machinery. As for some of the other positions, however, some of the forward positions like the yeoman perhaps, or some of the computer specialists, there wasn't much exercise. Basically, it was stand the watch, and movies was the only entertainment we had at the time. Now I imagine they have DVDs, and they have you know, the Walkmans, and they have computerized you know, entertainment. We only had the nightly movie at 8 o'clock, and it was on reels, and they would run it in the mess hall. However, in my division, I just gave up trying to watch a movie because I was being called out, or others in my division were being called out, something going wrong, something needing repair. So I never got to see a movie from start to finish.
Now you mentioned people had cigarettes. Wasn't there a danger of fire from smoking, or how did they handle that?
No, there wasn't. The only danger area per se for smoking would be in my compartment with the oxygen generators if something were to go wrong, and then they would put the smoking lamp out in that area so there wouldn't be any explosions caused by the lit cigarette. And I would do whatever is necessary to get things back under control and remove whatever hazard that might exist. But no, that was about it. Everyone's you know, smoked throughout the ship. There was no restricted areas.
And with the cooks, I assume they had to provide food almost round the clock?
Yeah, there was 3 shifts for the cooks also, and they worked as hard as engineering. They were constantly, if they weren't cooking, they were cleaning and inventorying. It was a pretty brutal job for the cooks. So perhaps it was better that I didn't become a cook, as I had, you know, wanted to in the beginning. But yes, they were constantly providing meals. There was 4 meals a day. There was breakfast, lunch, dinner, and what they call mid-rats, which was the midnight meal, which would be a buffet with steam tables, and you go in and you serve yourself. A combination of hot and cold. The other meals were hot: breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there was plenty of it, more than enough. The cooks, of course, did all the baking too. We did the bread, rolls, cakes, pastries. So in addition to the meals, they were always baking.
Now you mentioned the mess hall. I would assume this mess hall really wasn't too big.
No, it wasn't. It was small, and we would wait down in the lounge area, and we would go in shifts. There would be the first serving of lunch and the second serving of lunch and perhaps a third, and that's how they would do it. And you'd wait until there was room to bring up the second or the third serving. But once you were in there, it was 4 to a booth. There was tables and a booth type setting, and once you were seated, you could stay there, you know, and eat your fill and more. They just kept serving. You never got up. They just kept bringing trays and platters. Whenever a dish was empty, they would be there to fill it. If it was a seafood night, there'd be platters of fried shrimp and fish and whatever else. So they would just keep bringing all this food. Like I said, it was nearly impossible. Well, I had to control the weight, but it was difficult. And the bread baking, you could smell that throughout the ship. You know, the pastries, the food, whatever they were cooking. So it was like being locked in a kitchen 24 hours a day.
Now, do you feel that your training helped prepare you to be inside the submarine for 3 months?
most definitely. The best training I've ever had. I've since been in other jobs, and I've gone to school, but nothing can compare to the training I had in the Navy. There wasn't a situation that we weren't prepared for, and the drills and the training that constantly went on while we're underway and throughout the throughout the service, even better prepared us. We're constantly ready for whatever might occur, and a lot of unusual things did occur, and we were prepared.
Being in such a confined space, working areas, being so close together, did any problems arise between the men getting on each other's nerves?
None whatsoever. Surprising. I would imagine that might be part of the psychological screening that goes on before you even arrive at the site or at the boat. But no, no, I never even saw any tension, actually, in the years that I was in, 6 years.
Were there opportunities to find out what was going on back in the States and other parts of the world? How did they notify crew members if there were any problems at home, or did they have to wait until the end of a patrol?
That's sad. That's sad. Now, there was no communication other than 3 to 6 short telegram messages, limited to 20 words each, that they would periodically find a location where they could raise a mast through the water and receive these telegrams. And that was it. There was no mail, no telephones, or any type of communication. And I say it was sad because I can remember this one patrol where there was this one crew member who his wife meant everything to him, and that's all he talked about, to get him through patrol and getting home to his wife, and there was the one patrol where he came home to find out that she had left, and he was no longer with a wife. So no, anything bad that happens, unless it's a real major emergency and the Red Cross had involved itself in some way, there's no way that you're going to find out until after the patrol's over. And it was especially so during my period of service, because it was a wartime era. It was Vietnam, and the Cold War was still an issue also. So they would not break radio silence at any time. They would not do anything that would jeopardize the patrol. The whole object of a fleet ballistic missile submarine was to remain out there for 3 months as a firing platform and to remain undetected. Because if you were detected, it wouldn't be a deterrent because they could target you. So that was it. It was 3 months complete isolation, and no, we didn't know what was going on back home.
What was the mood like when you knew it was time for the patrol to be ending? How did they select who would get shore leave first, or what was the procedure?
We would come back into port, and then we would go on port and starboard liberty, meaning that one half of the crew would be on liberty, and the other half would be on the ship. When a patrol was actually over, the time we remained in New London was short. We would be there maybe a week at most. And then it was, there was the excitement of we're returning to the States. And we're looking forward to the flight, looking forward to everything we've been away from for 3 months. So there was a lot of excitement. Contrasted with the nights we were leaving, when it was somber. It was like a funeral. And returning to the States, though, we were ready, and they would fly us back, and then we would have 30 days R&R where we didn't have to report in or call or anything. They would just give us 30 days to do what we will. In addition, we have the regular leave that we accrue also. So in addition to that 30 days, we could take leave beyond that. And we were in port for approximately 90 days, but it went quick.
Now, you said your service was during the Cold War Vietnam era. Can you give us a feeling what it was like on some of those patrols? I imagine you were in contact with Russian submarines and maybe other submarines from friendly nations.
No, well, contact, and we wouldn't make any type of contact with friendly submarines. We had radio silence, so we didn't have that type of contact. We could identify other ships through sonar, and we wouldn't know which one of ours it might be. Perhaps they can identify it through sonar tapes or whatever, I'm not sure. But we were able to recognize the Russian submarines at that time because they were noisy. They didn't have the sound mount technology that we had at the time. And they didn't, unfortunately, till there was that incident in Norfolk with the sailor who was selling secrets to the Russians, and they were some of the secrets that were being sold was sound mount technology and sound control technology. But that was after my period of service. But during that time, there was no problem. If we could hear them 10 miles off, giving us plenty of time. They couldn't hear us, and giving us plenty of time to avoid those other vessels.
I would assume then that they had to maintain strict silence while on these patrols, and especially these surveillance missions.
We didn't do surveillance. The fast attack submarines, the ones without the ballistic missiles, they would do that type of duty. They're the ones that you would find in close to shore, doing the surveillance. We were a firing platform for missiles. We didn't necessarily have to maintain any silence unless the Russian fleet, which happened once, was going over us. But like I said, we could usually hear them before they could hear us, so we didn't really maintain any silence unless there was a situation. And like I said, I can remember that once, and that's once when we were going under the Russian fleet for some reason. So no, we didn't maintain silence, but it wasn't much excitement or noise going on anyway.
Well, what experience left the greatest impression on you in the submarine service? Did you have any?
The crew. I've never seen that kind of bonding since then. It's a tribal thing. I suppose in Indian you could compare it to an Indian tribe and the bonding that goes on. It's just that everybody knew that you were dependent on the next person, and it was just that interaction. Wherever you were, knowing the other crew members' duties and responsibilities, you knew what they were doing. You knew what you were doing, and you knew how it all tied together. And then there was a lot of respect for those who were doing their job especially well, too. So that that's why I don't think there was any tension. We all relied on each other. So I haven't seen a situation like that since.
And personal hygiene is a problem on many ships. How did they handle it there? I know on some ships you were allowed X number of minutes for showering. How did you handle getting clothes washed and things of that nature?
Well, thanks to nuclear power, the hygiene problem isn't as much of a problem as it used to be with the World War II submarines, where they had limited power to distill water, limited electrical power. Nuclear power gives you unlimited electrical power. and we had distillers that were constantly making fresh water. We had everything has backups, so we had an 8,000 gallon per day distiller, and then we had a backup distiller in case that one failed for some reason. So there was only one occasion when the distillers were down for some reason, and it wasn't more than a day. So the showers were readily available. There was plenty of water, great hygiene. Everyone took care of themselves. Electrical power, you know, we were always with lights. It was always a bright environment unless you were in the control room. That's when you could tell if it was day or night. If you were in the control room, if it was night, they would be running with red lights on, just in case you had to surface, the eyes would be prepared for the darkness. So that's about the only time you knew that that was nighttime, if the red lights were on in control. The rest of the ship was lit up, unless you were in berthing, of course.
If anybody had a medical problem, how did they handle it on board the submarine?
Well, there was a time when they had doctors. However, when I was in, they had gone to corpsmen. They had a corpsman stationed on board, and they're very proficient. They're not doctors, however. And I can remember there was a crew member who was injured. His forehead was cut really bad, and the corpsman had never done any stitching. And the person did look like Frankenstein there for a while. It was really a pitiful stitching job. But the corpsmen, they were great, and they did do their best. And but surprisingly, I never saw any sickness while we were underway. I don't know whether it was the air quality control or what, but no one ever got sick.
What
No
about
complaints.
dental problems?
They would ensure that all dental work was taken care of before you even went on patrol.
Well,
Best
they
of dental
probably
care.
did the same toward medical problems. They
Oh,
made
sure.
sure you were all well
Oh,
and
right.
so forth.
Exactly. In fact, that's how my career ended. After 9 patrols and a lot of stress, my blood pressure was out of control, and that disqualified me from submarines.
So that answers the question of why you left the service then.
Yes.
And what did you decide to do after you left the service?
I decided I was going to be a student, and I went to college as soon as I got out, and not having time for a relationship in the service. In fact, I really don't think that submarine service would have been good for a relationship. Marriages suffered lots of problems because of the scheduling. So as soon as I got out, I fell into marriage too. So I was married within the first year, and I was going to school the first year out.
What did you study in school?
Psychology.
And do you feel that your submarine service helped you in any way to make that decision or help you in your studies?
Actually, it was a hindrance in that I was so highly trained mechanically and technologically. So, not only was I an oxygen generator technician, but I had other specialties that I had been trained for. That job centers were directing me into all of these jobs that were of a technical nature, heating, air conditioning, hydraulics. Ended up with Westinghouse for 2 years doing robotic repair on nuclear generators. Not what I would have chosen, not a career path that I would have chosen, but I was into it for a while because I had to drop out of school for a while because of the marriage and responsibilities. And I've just recently returned, as a matter of fact, and the VA has been helping with that, and I have 9 more credits to finally finish my psychology degree. But I had been channeled by my training into a career path that I wouldn't have chosen had I had the opportunity to choose otherwise.
Now you mentioned the VA. You work at the VA center now?
Yes, I'm at the Stratton VA in Albany, New York, the Stratton VA Medical Center in Albany, New York. I'm doing outreach to senior veterans. I've been doing that for 4, perhaps 5 years now. And I'll be doing that until I finish my degree and then perhaps look at another position.
And do you keep in touch with anyone that you knew in the service?
No, that's funny, because there was one person though that I did meet, and it was at a tough time in my life. It was after a divorce. The marriage didn't last, and he just seemed to be there. He magically appeared where I was at that time, and he helped me through that period. It was a tough period, and it was like a best friend, like I'd never ever left him. It's just we just picked up where we had left off, and I think that would be the same with many of those crew members. If we were put together now, it would be as if we had never been apart. There is that bonding. But no, it seems like for some reason you don't keep in touch.
So you haven't had any reunions or anything of that nature?
No.
And you aren't into any military organizations as such or anything?
No, only through the job where I would meet with organizations.
If you had to do it over again, would you still serve on submarines?
That's a good question. That's a tough choice, a real tough choice, because it was grueling, and my health did suffer. I think maybe if my job had been different, if I didn't have the responsibilities that I had and the stress that I had, maybe in another position, I think I would have made the same choice. It was a challenge, and I think I would have taken the challenge again. Although as I look back, I don't see why I would, but yeah, I probably would.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.